It started with a utility bill that made absolutely no sense. I have always been the type of person who monitors household expenses carefully. I turn off lights when leaving rooms. I unplug appliances when not in use. I keep the thermostat at reasonable temperatures. So when my electric bill suddenly jumped by nearly 60% with no explanation, I knew something was not right. I called the power company first. The representative assured me there had been no rate increases, no billing errors, and that the meter was functioning correctly. He suggested perhaps I had purchased new appliances or started working from home. I had done neither. The mystery deepened when I checked my usage patterns on the utility company website. The strange thing was that much of the additional power consumption happened between midnight and 4 a.m., when I was asleep. The next weekend, we had our annual neighborhood barbecue. Between bites of grilled chicken and potato salad, I casually mentioned my bizarre electricity situation to my neighbor Frank. His eyebrows shot up immediately. "That is strange," he said, leaning closer. "My bill has been higher too, but not as much as what you are describing. Have you checked for any unusual connections?" Two other neighbors joined our conversation, both reporting smaller but noticeable increases. The common factor: all of our properties bordered the home of Diane Wellington, or as most residents secretly called her, Karen from HOA Hell. Diane had been the president of our homeowners association for 5 years, ruling with an iron fist and a selective interpretation of the bylaws. That night I could not sleep. Around 1 a.m., I decided to inspect the exterior of my house. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and nagging suspicion, I carefully examined the outdoor outlets. At first, I noticed nothing unusual. But then, hidden behind a decorative shrub near the property line, I spotted it. A weatherproof junction box that I had never installed, cleverly disguised to match my house siding. I carefully followed what appeared to be a thin wire trail, partially buried in mulch and running along my fence line. It led directly to the property line with Diane's house, where it disappeared beneath a loose board in the fence. My heart pounded as the pieces started falling into place. Someone had created an unauthorized connection to my electrical system, but I needed proof. The next day, I purchased a small motion-activated camera and concealed it facing my outdoor outlet. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Then on the fourth night at precisely 2:13 a.m., the camera captured undeniable evidence. Diane Wellington, dressed in dark clothing, crept onto my property, retrieved something from behind the shrub, and connected it to her Tesla parked just on the other side of the fence. The cable was so well camouflaged that no one would notice it during daylight hours. I watched the footage over and over, feeling a strange mix of vindication and rage. The camera had caught her smug expression perfectly, the look of someone who believed rules existed for others but not for herself. I calculated roughly how much electricity she had been stealing based on Tesla charging rates and my increased bills. The total came to approximately $300 over several months. The next day, I knocked on her door, tablet in hand with the video queued up. When Diane answered, her pleasant HOA president smile quickly vanished as I explained what I had discovered. "Do you have any explanation for this, Diane?" I asked, turning the screen toward her. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. "You are being ridiculously petty about this," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "It is just a little electricity. Besides, as HOA president, I regularly inspect properties for compliance issues. Perhaps you should worry more about your own violations than about my environmental choices." Her voice carried that unmistakable threat: "Cross me, and you will regret it." I left her doorstep knowing this was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. I believe in proper procedures. I trust systems. Or at least I used to. The day after confronting Diane, I began documenting everything meticulously. I created a spreadsheet tracking the stolen electricity with timestamps from the video footage. I calculated kilowatt-hour costs based on my utility rates. I photographed the hidden connection and the cable pathway. I even created a timeline of when my bills had first started increasing. My first official action was drafting a formal complaint to the HOA board. The email detailed the theft with attached evidence and requested both reimbursement and disciplinary action against Diane. I sent it to all 5 board members, including Diane herself, as protocol required. 3 days passed with no response, which seemed unusual for our normally responsive board. When I checked with Marcus, the board treasurer whom I occasionally played tennis with, his response left me stunned. "What complaint?" he asked, genuinely confused. "We have not received anything from you." When I showed him the sent email on my phone, he frowned. "You should know that Diane manages the board email account. All communications go through her first." The realization hit me like a truck. She had been intercepting my complaints, ensuring the board never saw them. Marcus promised to mention it at the next meeting, but warned me that Diane had already been talking about me to other board members, describing me as troublesome, and making false accusations due to a personal vendetta. Undeterred, I decided to approach board members individually. I met with Janet first, the board secretary. She barely let me finish explaining before interrupting. "Diane already told us about your situation," she said coolly. "She mentioned you have been struggling financially and looking for people to blame. The board sympathizes, but making accusations against Diane is not the answer." My meetings with the other board members yielded similar results. Diane had systematically poisoned the well, telling each of them a different version of events that painted me as unstable, vindictive, or financially desperate. One by one, they closed ranks around her. With the HOA route effectively blocked, I contacted the local police department. Officer Rodriguez listened patiently to my story and examined my evidence. "I understand your frustration," he said, closing his notebook. "But this falls under civil matters, not criminal. The value is below the threshold for grand theft, the trespassing is minimal, and there is the complication of her HOA position giving her certain access rights. Your best bet is small claims court, or continuing to work through your HOA." Desperate for resolution, I sent Diane a certified letter demanding payment of $387.42 for the stolen electricity, with a deadline of 14 days. The return receipt confirmed she received it, but no response came. Instead, 5 days later, I found something else in my mailbox: 3 separate HOA violation notices. The first cited unapproved landscape modifications, regarding some decorative rocks I had placed along my garden path months ago. The second claimed my mailbox paint was not within approved color parameters, despite being the exact shade included in the HOA guidelines. The third notice, most absurdly, stated my garbage bins had been visible from the street beyond permitted hours, with a photo showing them 10 minutes after the mandatory 7 p.m. retrieval time. Each violation carried a $75 fine. Within days, 2 more notices arrived for equally trivial infractions. Her message was crystal clear: "Fight me, and I will make your life miserable." The emotional toll began to mount. Neighbors who once chatted freely with me now seemed distant, casting sideways glances when I walked past. At the monthly community gathering, conversation stopped when I approached. Diane had been busy spreading her version of events throughout the neighborhood. "I heard you have been harassing Diane," my neighbor Susan whispered one day as we collected our mail simultaneously. "She has been very upset. She told everyone about your financial problems and how you are blaming others." I started to explain, but Susan hurried inside without waiting for my response. Every legitimate avenue had led to a dead end. The HOA board was under her influence. The police considered it too minor to intervene. Neighbors believed her lies. And now I was facing escalating fines for imaginary violations, fines that would continue accumulating as long as Diane remained in power. That night, I sat in my darkened living room staring at the ceiling. The system had failed me completely. I had tried doing things the right way, the proper way, the legal way. And for my efforts, I was now ostracized in my own neighborhood and facing hundreds of dollars in fraudulent fines on top of the money already stolen from me. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider alternatives I would have never previously entertained. If legitimate channels would not bring justice, perhaps it was time to create my own. They say knowledge is power. In my case, knowledge would become voltage, precisely calculated and strategically deployed. The morning after my decision, I called my old college friend Derek, now an electrical engineer specializing in power systems. I invited him over for dinner that weekend, mentioning casually that I had some electrical questions. Derek arrived Saturday evening, and after ensuring we had privacy, I revealed the entire situation. His initial reaction was disbelief, then fascination with the audacity of the theft. "This is actually not that uncommon," he explained as we moved to my garage workshop. "Power theft happens more than people realize, though usually not in upscale neighborhoods like this." Derek sketched a basic diagram of how normal power flows to outdoor outlets. Your standard outdoor outlet provides 120 volts at 15 or 20 amps, he explained. Tesla charging adapters are designed to work with standard outlets, but they have built-in protection circuits to prevent damage from minor surges or inconsistent power. For the next 3 hours, Derek explained electrical concepts I had never considered: load detection, circuit protection, surge dynamics, and the difference between damaging surges versus catastrophic ones. "Modern Teslas have sophisticated battery management systems," he noted. "They can handle small power fluctuations, but every system has limitations." The key insight came when Derek explained the weakest link in the charging system. The charging port interface and adapter are vulnerable points. The car protects the main battery well, but the charging components themselves are more exposed. A precisely calibrated surge could damage the charging system without affecting the main battery or leaving obvious evidence of tampering. After Derek left, I spent every night researching. I learned about Tesla's charging specifications. I studied electrical forums where Tesla owners discussed maintenance issues. I found threads describing charging port failures and their causes. One post particularly caught my attention: a Tesla owner describing how a power anomaly had damaged his charging port, requiring a $15,000 repair not covered by warranty because it was deemed external damage. Simultaneously, I began studying the HOA regulations with new intensity. Most people never read these documents thoroughly, and buried in our 76-page bylaws, I found something interesting. Section 1873 stated, "Homeowners may install security measures on their own property without prior approval, provided such measures are not visible from public areas and do not create nuisances for adjacent properties." The provision had been added 3 years ago after a series of package thefts in the neighborhood, but its wording was broad enough to potentially cover what I was considering: a system designed to protect my property from unauthorized power use could arguably qualify as a security measure. The final phase of my research focused on determining the precise voltage required. Too little would trigger the Tesla's protection systems without causing damage. Too much would be obviously deliberate sabotage and potentially dangerous. I needed something in between, enough to damage the charging components while appearing to be nothing more than an unfortunate power anomaly. I created a simple notebook with calculations and diagrams. According to my research, Tesla charging adapters were rated to handle brief surges up to certain thresholds. A surge of approximately 30% above normal household voltage for a specific duration would likely damage the charging components while appearing to be within the realm of possible household electrical anomalies. The legal implications weighed heavily on me. I was not seeking to cause physical harm, property destruction, or create dangerous conditions. I wanted a targeted response that would stop the theft while making the consequences land squarely on the charging system that was being used to steal from me. My research concluded with an important realization. The typical home insurance policy specifically excludes coverage for damage resulting from the unauthorized use of utilities. If Diane was stealing electricity and her equipment was damaged as a result, her insurance would likely deny the claim, adding financial consequences to her actions. By the end of 2 weeks of intensive study, my notebook contained everything I needed: electrical specifications, legal considerations, safety parameters, and implementation plans. The knowledge transformed me from victim to strategist. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw someone helpless against injustice. I saw someone preparing to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The research phase was complete. Now it was time to build. The following weekend, I drove to 3 different hardware stores in neighboring towns, purchasing components at each location. I bought nothing suspicious, standard electrical parts available to any homeowner doing repairs. The shopping list included a heavy-duty weatherproof outlet, a current sensing relay, a simple switching circuit, and various wires and connectors. Nothing individually unusual, but together they would form something quite specific. At home, I converted my garage into a temporary workshop. The dining room table became my drafting space, covered with circuit diagrams and specifications. The work required precision and patience. What I was building was not a crude power surge device, but rather a sophisticated detection and response system. The heart of the setup was the current sensing relay, a device that could detect when power was being drawn from the circuit. This would activate only when someone connected to the outlet. I modified the relay to trigger a secondary circuit that would briefly increase voltage within precisely calculated parameters. The increase would last exactly 780 milliseconds, long enough to affect sensitive electronics but short enough to appear as a normal power grid anomaly. Testing was critical. I created a simple load simulator to represent a device drawing power, then measured the output with a multimeter. The first 3 tests failed. The voltage increase was either too high or too low. By the 4th attempt, I achieved the target range, a 30.4% increase for 780 milliseconds before returning to normal, enough to disrupt sensitive charging components without creating obvious evidence of deliberate tampering. The system needed to be remotely controlled. I installed a small wireless receiver connected to a switch that would activate the circuit only when triggered. This would allow me to control the timing precisely. More importantly, it meant the outlet would function normally at all other times. No one testing it would find anything unusual. For additional protection, I upgraded my security cameras. The previous camera had served its purpose in documenting the theft, but I needed better coverage now. I installed 3 new cameras with improved night vision and wider angles, positioning them to cover my entire backyard and the area where Diane accessed my property. The cameras connected to a secure digital video recorder hidden in my attic rather than cloud storage that could potentially be accessed by others. The final technical component was the outlet itself. I replaced my standard outdoor outlet with a heavy-duty weatherproof version that looked identical but contained my modified circuitry inside. From the outside, it appeared completely normal, the same standard outlet that had been there before, just newer and cleaner. With the technical aspects complete, I turned to creating plausible deniability. I designed an official-looking notice on my computer. Notice: electrical system upgrades in progress. Northern Heights Power Company will be conducting system maintenance and upgrades throughout the neighborhood during the coming weeks. Residents may experience brief power fluctuations during this period. We apologize for any inconvenience. I printed several copies and placed them on community bulletin boards throughout the neighborhood, including the one directly outside Diane's house. This served dual purposes, creating a cover story for any electrical anomalies, while also providing a subtle warning that Diane would undoubtedly ignore. The final touch was ensuring Diane would continue her pattern of theft. For several days after installing my system, I deliberately left the power deactivated during her usual theft times. This was a calculated risk. Diane might become suspicious if her free electricity suddenly vanished. But I needed to test the complete system under real conditions before activating it. On day 4, I deliberately created a small HOA violation for Diane to notice. I left my garden hose partially visible from the street, a minor infraction according to the bylaws. As expected, the violation notice appeared in my mailbox the next day, featuring Diane's signature and her characteristically condescending note. Continued violations may result in additional fines and board action. That evening, I received a text notification that motion had been detected near my outdoor outlet. Checking the camera feed, I saw Diane inspecting the area, likely noticing the new outlet. She appeared hesitant but did not connect anything. She was testing, observing, evaluating whether her power source remained available. I activated the outlet but kept the surge circuit disabled. That night, another motion alert showed Diane had returned and successfully connected her Tesla. The current sensor confirmed power was being drawn. The system was working perfectly, detecting the unauthorized connection while allowing it to proceed normally. For 3 more nights, I monitored the system, ensuring every component functioned as designed. Each night, Diane returned to steal more electricity, growing more confident that her free power source remained undetected. The pattern was established. The trap was set. On the 7th night after installation, I sat at my computer watching the live camera feeds. My finger hovered over the activation button that would enable the surge circuit. A mix of emotions swirled through me: apprehension, determination, and a strange sense of calm. Everything was in place. The system was tested. The appropriate warnings had been given and ignored. All that remained was to wait for Diane to make her predictable move. And when she did, justice would finally be served, not through the failed systems I had trusted, but through the application of knowledge, patience, and precisely calculated voltage. Tuesday night, 11:48 p.m. Rain lightly tapped against my windows as I sat in front of my monitors. The house was completely silent except for the occasional low rumble of thunder in the distance. I had expected Diane to make her move tonight. The Tesla app on her phone would show her battery level below 30%, her typical threshold for stealing a charge. I had been monitoring her pattern for weeks. She typically charged her Tesla twice weekly, Sunday and Wednesday nights, but the approaching thunderstorm made tonight more likely. Tesla owners are advised to charge before storms that might cause power outages. The weather was working in my favor. My prediction proved correct. At exactly 5:37 a.m., the motion sensor alert flashed on my screen. Camera 2 showed movement near the fence line. I switched to the main monitor displaying all camera feeds simultaneously. There she was, Diane Wellington, dressed in a dark raincoat, hood pulled up against the light rain, moving with practiced efficiency across my property. My heart pounded as I watched her retrieve the extension cord from its hiding place and connect it to my outdoor outlet. The current sensor immediately registered the power draw, sending data to my system. The Tesla was pulling approximately 1.8 kilowatts, consistent with standard home charging. I zoomed in on camera 3, which provided a clear view of her Tesla parked just on the other side of the fence. The charging port glowed with the characteristic blue pulsing light, indicating active charging. Diane stood there for a moment, seemingly satisfied, before hurrying back toward her house. She never noticed the small red recording light on my carefully concealed camera. Now came the moment of decision. My finger hovered over the keyboard. The surge circuit was ready, requiring only my activation command. I hesitated briefly, considering one last time what I was about to do. Was this truly justified? Had I exhausted every legitimate option? The answer was clear. I had tried proper channels. I had documented the theft. I had attempted resolution through the HOA, through direct confrontation, through law enforcement. All had failed. I pressed enter. The system acknowledged the command with a simple message. Circuit activated. On camera 3, nothing visibly changed for approximately 7 seconds. Then it happened. A brief flicker in the Tesla's charging indicator light. The blue glow stuttered, turned amber, then began flashing red. The car's display panel lit up with warning messages, clearly visible even through the rain-streaked camera lens. An alarm sound must have triggered inside Diane's house, because less than 30 seconds later, she burst from her back door, running toward the vehicle. The panic on her face was evident even in the low-light camera footage. She reached the Tesla and stared at the display panel in obvious distress. Warning icons flashed as she frantically tapped at the screen. Diane immediately disconnected the charging cable from her vehicle, examining the connector with a confused expression. She then rushed to my property, disconnected the extension cord from my outlet, and hastily began gathering her equipment. Her movements were no longer measured and confident. They were panicked and clumsy. She dropped the extension cord twice before finally managing to coil it properly. Before leaving, she examined my outlet closely, likely looking for signs of tampering or damage. Finding nothing unusual about the standard-looking outlet, her confusion only seemed to deepen. The entire incident lasted less than 4 minutes from the moment I activated the surge until Diane disappeared back into her house, taking her damaged charging equipment with her. I continued monitoring all systems. The voltage had returned to normal immediately after the brief surge. The outlet was functioning perfectly. There was no evidence of what had occurred except in my secured video files. I checked the weather report again. The thunderstorm was increasing in intensity, with lightning strikes reported in the area. Perfect timing. For the remainder of the night, I archived and secured the video evidence, storing copies in multiple locations including an encrypted cloud account. The footage clearly showed Diane trespassing, stealing electricity, and the subsequent malfunction of her vehicle. I added this to my growing file of evidence against her, though I hoped it would never need to be used. At 5:30 a.m. before sunrise, I put on a raincoat and went outside to examine the outlet. Despite the continuing light rain, I needed to ensure there were no visible signs of what had transpired. The outlet looked completely normal. I disconnected my modified circuit and replaced it with a standard outlet that matched exactly what had been there originally. The evidence of my countermeasure was now completely removed. I returned to my computer and deleted the temporary files related to the activation sequence, keeping only the secure video evidence of Diane's trespassing and theft. By 6:15 a.m., as the neighborhood began stirring to life, every trace of my intervention had been erased. To any observer, including professional inspectors, there would be nothing unusual to find. Just a standard outlet and a Tesla with damaged charging components. I finally allowed myself to relax, though I felt no triumph or joy, only a grim satisfaction that justice had been served. The rain continued falling outside, washing away footprints and providing nature's own cleansing. I knew what would happen next. Diane would contact Tesla service. They would diagnose damage to the charging system. They would ask questions about power surges or irregular charging practices, and ultimately they would present her with a substantial repair bill. As dawn broke, I closed my laptop and prepared for a normal day at work. Phase 1 was complete. Now I would watch and wait as consequences unfolded at their own pace. The ball was no longer in my court. It was in Diane's, along with a damaged Tesla charging system that would soon deliver its own expensive message about the cost of theft. The neighborhood seemed unusually quiet for the next few days. I maintained my normal routine, leaving for work at 7:30 a.m., returning at 6:15 p.m., tending to my garden on Wednesday evening. Nothing in my behavior suggested anything had changed, but I observed everything with heightened awareness, noting subtle shifts in the neighborhood dynamic. The first sign came 3 days after the incident. The monthly HOA meeting was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. at the community center. I arrived early, choosing a seat with a clear view of the door. As board members filtered in, one face was conspicuously absent, Diane Wellington. When the meeting started 15 minutes late, the vice president explained that Diane had car troubles and could not attend. This was unprecedented. In 5 years, Diane had never missed a meeting. Later that week, my neighbor Frank mentioned seeing a Tesla service vehicle parked in Diane's driveway. "Apparently something major is wrong with her car," he said while retrieving his mail. "She has been complaining about it to anyone who will listen. Something about a power surge during the thunderstorm the other night." The following Monday, I received an anonymous phone call. "Is this the homeowner at 1487 Oakwood Drive?" a male voice asked. When I confirmed, he continued, "I thought you should know. I work at the Tesla Service Center. We do not normally discuss customer repairs, but given the circumstances, your neighbor brought in a Model Y with severe charging system damage. The repair estimate is $16,400. She tried claiming it under warranty, but the diagnostic shows clear evidence of improper charging practices. Insurance will not cover it either without proof of a lightning strike, which the damage pattern does not match." Before I could ask questions, the caller hung up. I had expected damage, but not to this extent. The financial impact would be significant even for someone of Diane's apparent wealth. Part of me felt a momentary pang of guilt, quickly replaced by the memory of her smugness when dismissing my complaints and the hundreds of dollars she had stolen from me. Over the next 2 weeks, rumors spread throughout the neighborhood. Diane was telling everyone her car had been vandalized. She never specified how exactly, which only fueled speculation. Some neighbors suggested teenagers might have damaged it. Others wondered if it was targeted because of her HOA position. No one connected it to power theft. That particular detail remained known only to Diane and myself. Then came the community-wide email. "Emergency HOA meeting. Neighborhood security concerns." Diane had scheduled a special session to address what she called a disturbing incident of property damage and to propose new security measures for the neighborhood. The meeting room was packed when I arrived. Diane stood at the podium, her usually impeccable appearance showing subtle signs of strain, her hair not quite perfectly styled, her typically crisp blazer replaced with a more casual sweater. Her voice carried a brittle quality I had never heard before. As many of you know, my vehicle was recently damaged through what appears to be deliberate tampering, she began, scanning the room. While I cannot discuss specifics due to the ongoing investigation, I believe this incident highlights serious security vulnerabilities in our community. She proceeded to outline an expensive proposal: security cameras at neighborhood entrances, regular security patrols, and motion-activated lighting throughout common areas. The total cost would exceed $45,000 to be paid from HOA reserves, reserves that should have been allocated for playground renovations and landscape improvements. During the question period, I raised my hand. Diane hesitated visibly before acknowledging me. "I am curious about the specific nature of this vandalism," I said calmly. "Was anything else in the neighborhood targeted or just your vehicle?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Just my vehicle, which suggests it was targeted specifically because of my position enforcing community standards." "That seems unusual," I continued. "Have there been any other incidents reported in the area, anything that would justify such a substantial expense?" "Not yet," she replied tersely, "but prevention is preferable to reaction." I asked one final question. "Has the police investigation revealed any suspects or evidence of how this damage occurred?" I kept my expression neutral, genuinely curious about her response. Diane's composure slipped momentarily. "The investigation is ongoing. I am not at liberty to share details." Her voice trembled slightly. Several neighbors exchanged glances, clearly noting her unusual behavior. Throughout the remainder of the meeting, I asked no further questions. I did not need to. Each time Diane spoke, her narrative became more convoluted, her explanations more defensive. Other homeowners began asking practical questions about costs and necessity. The seed of doubt had been planted. The security measures were put to a vote and defeated 27-8. As people filed out, I overheard fragments of conversation. "Seems excessive for one incident. Why so secretive about what happened? Never seen Diane so rattled." Walking home under the evening sky, I realized something fundamental had shifted. Diane's authority had always rested on an appearance of perfect control and absolute confidence. Now that facade showed cracks. Questions were being asked. And in a community built on perception and appearances, questions were often more damaging than answers. I had not directly exposed Diane's theft. I did not need to. Her own response to the consequences was doing that work for me, far more effectively than any accusation I could have made. 1 month after the failed security proposal, an anonymous letter arrived at the homes of all HOA board members except Diane. The envelope contained no return address, just a printed note reading, "Financial concerns, confidential review requested," along with several pages of highlighted HOA financial statements. I had nothing to do with this letter. Someone else in the neighborhood had apparently decided to scrutinize the HOA financials more carefully, perhaps motivated by Diane's recent push for expensive security measures. The results were revealing. The following week, a closed emergency board meeting was called. Though not privy to the discussions, neighbors reported seeing board members entering the community center with serious expressions, carrying folders of documents. The meeting lasted over 4 hours. 3 days later, residents received an official communication. The HOA board regrets to inform the community that financial irregularities have been discovered in our accounts. A full audit is underway. In the interim, all non-essential expenditures are frozen, and the board will operate under temporary leadership. The letter did not mention Diane specifically, but her absence from subsequent community events told its own story. When the complete audit findings were presented at a special community meeting 2 weeks later, the evidence was damning. Over 4 years, approximately $37,000 of HOA funds had been misappropriated for personal expenses, gasoline, restaurant meals, office supplies, and most notably, several large payments to an auto detailing service specializing in luxury vehicles. Marcus, the treasurer, looked visibly shaken as he presented the findings. "We trusted our systems and our leadership," he said, not meeting anyone's eyes. "That trust was misplaced. We have already consulted legal counsel regarding next steps." Diane did not attend this meeting either. Instead, her lawyer delivered a statement acknowledging accounting errors and offering to repay disputed funds while denying deliberate wrongdoing. The community voted unanimously to reject this offer and proceed with formal charges. At the next regular meeting, a completely restructured board was introduced. Janet, once Diane's staunch defender, was now interim president. Her first official act was a public apology for the selective enforcement of rules that had characterized previous leadership. Moving forward, all violation notices will be reviewed by multiple board members, she announced. And we welcome community input on revising bylaws that may be outdated or unnecessarily restrictive. The atmosphere in the neighborhood gradually transformed. Neighbors who had avoided eye contact now stopped to chat. Community events saw increased participation. Small, previously forbidden expressions of individuality began appearing. A colorful garden gnome here, a decorative flag there, as residents tested the boundaries of the new, more reasonable leadership. One morning, I wrote a check for $400 to the Northern Heights Community Garden Fund, with no name in the memo line. I mailed it from a post office in the next town over. The amount represented approximately what Diane had stolen from me in electricity, now redirected to benefit the entire community. 3 months after the incident with her Tesla, a for sale sign appeared in front of Diane's house. The listing described it as a motivated seller situation. Neighbors reported moving trucks arriving shortly thereafter, loaded quickly, and departing before most residents returned from work. Diane Wellington left without goodbyes, her 5-year reign over our community ending not with confrontation, but with quiet disgrace. The following spring, I stood watering flowers in my front yard when Janet walked by with her dog. "The community garden expansion is coming along beautifully," she commented. "The anonymous donation we received covered all the new raised beds and the irrigation system." I nodded, smiling. "It is amazing how things have changed around here." "For the better," Janet agreed. "Did you hear the news? The new homeowners moving into Diane's old house seem lovely. Young family, 2 children. They are excited about the playground renovations we have scheduled for fall." As Janet continued her walk, I looked around at the neighborhood. The same houses, the same streets, but somehow fundamentally transformed. Children played more freely in front yards. Neighbors chatted across driveways. Gardens showed touches of personal expression previously forbidden. No one ever connected me to what happened with Diane's Tesla. No one needed to. Justice had come not as a thunderclap, but as a gentle correction, restoring balance to a community that had lived too long under the shadow of petty tyranny. That evening, as I plugged my own electric lawn tools into my perfectly normal, standard outdoor outlet, I felt not triumph but simple contentment. The neighborhood had found its equilibrium again. And while I never spoke of what transpired on that rainy night, I kept the evidence securely stored, a reminder that sometimes justice requires not just patience and documentation, but also precisely calculated voltage.